Your brand may be staying on top of current trends, but are you agile enough to stay relevant, resilient, and successful as customers, competition, and the world continues to change at a breakneck pace? I'm thrilled to share the newly revised version of my first book, The Agile Brand. I'm calling it The Agile Brand Revisited. It's been updated to reflect our continually changing world, and it provides 7 principles that form the backbone of an agile brand, offering detailed insights and actionable steps for incorporating them into your business strategy. This is the book that started it all, and I'm excited to share it with you. It's now available in print and digital formats and available everywhere. Learn more by going to the Agile Brand Guide website at www.agilebrandguide.com. Welcome to Season 4 of The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we discuss business agility through customer experience, employee experience, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at gregkihlstrom.com and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile Brand podcast. Is your business ready to run without you? Today we're going to talk about learning to let go as a business owner and giving more control over to your team members. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Jeff Finney, owner of Ultimate Cabinet Components and author of That's It, I'm Fired. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. Why don't we start by you giving a little background on yourself and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so as you said, I own a cabinet shop. Basically, we mill cabinet components for other cabinet shops that are not automated, so CNC equipment. And we also build, residential style custom cabinets like you have in your kitchen at home. And I've done that for about the last 17, 18 years. I graduated from college in '01, went to work for a large construction company here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And after that, I started my own cabinet shop and just kind of been going hard since then. And that's kind of what I do in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Well, yeah. And in addition to that, you recently wrote a book
Yep.
called That's It, I'm Fired. And, I'd love to talk through that and some ideas in it. So why don't you first start out by, just telling us what's the primary message in the book and why did you choose to write it?
Yeah. So basically leading up to the book, a few years ago, I started a blog that was centered kind of around the woodworking industry. But it was also, it quickly evolved into more of like business principles, not just for the woodworking industry, but just in general. And after, accumulating enough articles and get a pretty good following on the blog, I decided to kind of write a book. And initially it just started out as what was going to be an ebook that I sent to subscribers. And, pretty soon I realized, I had enough content there to actually flesh out a whole book. So, that was about 2 years ago is when I started that. And it's been a very on and off process, more off than on, and here over the last few months, we finally got it tidied up and got with a publisher that helped me kind of get through that process that I had no idea how to do. But basically it's just, it ends up being kind of a tactical guide of how to take your business to where you want it to be, kind of what you had in your head all along when you went into business for yourself. So, I would say a lot of small businesses are probably similar to me in that they're kind of a slave to their business. It's not what they imagined, and they're kind of stuck working in the business rather than on it. And kind of just laid out my guide on how I got my company to a point where it can operate for the biggest part, operate without me.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I totally, I can relate to that. I mean, when I started my first company, the marketing agency, classic like entrepreneur fallacy of I started a company thinking that it would let me do what I love doing all day long, and instead I ended up having to learn. I was a designer, interactive designer, stuff like that, and instead I had to learn about finance and HR and operations and lots of stuff that came in very, very handy later on, but it wasn't exactly what I originally signed up for. So
that's right. They usually morphs into something else. And what the funny part about that is, for me anyway, I've been doing this for long enough that I've been through a lot of those business cycles, those ups and downs several times. And what I've found is once I finally embraced it, is what I found that I enjoyed that part of it, the business part of it, as much or more, probably more than what I used to enjoy just working with my hands out on the shop floor, So I found that growing into an actual business where I'm working on the business, I get a very big reward out of that.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's yeah, for me it was, I always thought of myself as a quote unquote creative. There's designers and there's writers and there's artists that are considered creative, but I never really thought about how you can be creative and innovative on the business side of things. And so I think just kind of embracing that definitely opened up a lot of things that, again, initially seemed like, oh, I don't want to think about that stuff, but it really, like, I wouldn't be where I am today and working with the kind of companies that I'm working with if I didn't really embrace and understand the
Embrace that.
business side of things.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, so also your business, or your book, poses the question: is your business ready to run without you? Um, Along that theme, what is it that holds many business owners back? Like we were just talking about, back from being able to step away and from direct involvement in their business.
Well, I think there's a few things, and that's probably the biggest. The answer to that question is probably the biggest reason I actually wrote the book, because I kind of figured out a process that worked for me and our company and a couple of other companies that I've helped out along the way, and kind of just the brief summary of that process is, it all starts out with a vision, and as goofy as that sounds, everybody talks about a vision for your company, and people kind of sideline the importance of it, and why a vision is so important is, if you do a vision correctly, it's so far out in the distance, it's something that's really not attainable. um, it's something you may never reach. So, think of like Disney saying, put a smile on every face, or, something like that. Ours is to become the most efficient cabinet component manufacturer in the world.
Yeah.
And the reason I kind of use the world is because I wanted it to be bigger than just the US or the North America or something like that, because I wanted it to be unattainable. But the great thing about a vision that's unattainable is it becomes kind of that lighthouse out in the distance where, you've got this guidepost to make all your business decisions on. So if a decision is going to drag you away from your vision and not bring you closer to it, then it's an automatic no. But if you were looking at a certain contract or a certain type of work, or maybe even acquiring another business, and it takes you closer to your vision, then it's a very easy yes, and it makes it easier to grow your business. So it's a vision is like step one, and once you figure that out and you've got that guidepost, then as an owner, you can kind of step back and start delegating. That becomes the second step, delegating some of those roles that as an owner you do not need to be doing. It's holding you and your business back. So you owe it to your business to not be doing that role. And for me, it was the shop floor. I had to get the shop floor off of my plate. I just needed to not be doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And for delegation to be kind of sticky, for it to work, you have to have good processes, and that's the third component of this. The third leg of it is you got to have SOPs, standard operating procedures, and we do them very simply. We basically have a piece of notebook paper. We print pictures off on a little Bluetooth printer, little wallet-sized photos, and we stick them on there. And there's no more than 8 pictures on a page, and we literally handwrite captions a lot of times underneath these pictures that show what it explain what it shows.
Yeah.
And 8 steps, and that's your process. And basically we let the employee kind of fill in the gaps. We just kind of give them the beginning, the end, and the middle, so they kind of know where to go, but we kind of let them do it their own way. We don't tell them how to hold the drill, we just tell them where to put the screw, type thing. And it's some processes can get so detailed that employees just don't pay attention to them because they get kind of bogged down. So we just kind of give them the highlights and let them figure out the details in the middle, but basically we show them what the finished product needs to look like. So once you've kind of mastered those 3, the fourth and kind of biggest step, and this is the part that I'm in right now, is kind of assessing the value of your business. And the value of your business, I'm not necessarily saying from a dollar perspective, but from is it valuable? Would it be valuable to somebody else? So the way I look at it is the way I look at and assess the value of my business is what does the business do or what is the business worth without me in it? So
Yeah.
if I pull me out of it, what devalues the business? So for instance, right now, what I'm working on is getting the accounting off of my plate and getting procedures for all of the accounting to where that can be done without me being involved in it. And that's the last major component that I've got to tackle in my business to get it to where I can honestly say that this thing could run without me just as good as it can with me. So that's kind of the fourth step, and it's a long ways down the road. But once you get to there, that's really where all this, that's really when you can truly say that you fired yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what would your advice be to let's say a reluctant leader that
Sure.
that's just they're learning to delegate, or they're just they feel like the business shouldn't run without them. Let's say there's some safe things they can start doing.
Yeah, that's right. So with me, it was easy. So the way that I figured some of this stuff out, honestly, was I realized that the business was getting to a point where I was wearing way too many hats, and it was the reason we had stumped in our growth was because of me. I was doing too many functions,
Yeah.
so I didn't exactly know what to do about that. At the time, we had about 7 employees, 8 employees, somewhere around there, and I did not know exactly how to get over that hump. I didn't know at the time it was me that was causing these bottlenecks. So
Yeah.
I actually went out and hired a executive business coach here in Oklahoma City, and he knew a little bit about manufacturing. He knew about the construction industry, so we kind of talked the same lingo. And it was him that kind of helped me kind of lay out this roadmap of like, okay, we need to get a vision for the company so we know where we're going, and then we need to learn how to delegate responsibilities off of your plate. And so in figuring that out, I kind of figured out this process of how to delegate. I was doing delegation all wrong. I was just kind of not wanting to do a task, so I'd tell somebody else to do it, and then it would always
Right.
end up coming back onto my plate, and that just doesn't work. So, the biggest thing I would tell an owner that's just starting, is once they've got their vision, they need to look at their kind of daily routine and what is the one thing that they're doing that is holding the company back the most, and just focus on delegating that properly, getting it to where it truly is off of their plate and they're kind of fired from that activity. So for me, it was really easy. Like I said earlier, it's the shop floor. I had to get that off of my plate to where I wasn't out there taking time on the shop floor when I should have been working on the business, sales, or marketing, or whatever that was.
This process it certainly takes a leader that's willing to do that and explore a letting go, and some of that, sometimes that might even involve ego of because it is nice to feel indispensable or whatever, but it also takes the right employees and the right team, right? So how do you find the right team that's not gonna get anxious about this idea of the leader of the organization kind of stepping away a little bit, even how, like, what do you look for in team members?
Yeah. So for me, it it really took me truly trusting people, and then if the people were not on board for that, if they were not on board for that and they didn't accept the responsibility or they didn't want it, but they may have said they did,
Yeah.
then obviously that's not the right person for your organization. So you need to move on and trust somebody else. And that's just an unfortunate part about being a business owner, that not everybody works out. But I can tell you that that process at the first was necessary, but now that I've got better at it, I'm better at picking the right people to begin with, if that makes sense. So we've got a really unique process in how we hire when we need a position filled. First of all, we always look within, and then if we can't fill it within, we go out and put a job offering on all the various websites that we all use.
Right.
And instead of just hiring somebody, we'll go through the interview process, the traditional interview process, and ask all the questions. But then we always put them through a working interview. So we do up to a 4-day working interview. And at the end of the day, the team members around them that are working in their same team, they kind of evaluate them with just 3 simple questions. And the final question is basically, would you like to see this potential employee come back another day? And if the answer is yes, then we have them come back another day. And if the answer is no, then it ends there. And
Yeah.
what we've found there is we get this instant compatibility with our culture. And if that compatibility is not there with that team member, then they're not a fit for our team. And it's just that simple. And what we've really found is that, during an interview, some employees will kind of tell you what they want to hear or what you want to hear type thing,
Yeah.
but by actually getting into the trenches and working with the team members that they're going to be working with, well, some people are just not compatible with other people, or some people are not compatible with the job objectives that you're laying out that you need done. And that's just the fact of the matter. Not everybody's compatible with every job. So by giving them a few days in the job, you're going to start to find out what makes this person tick, what makes them good, or what makes them not a fit for that job. And it's kind of like a no risk for either one of you, for the person that's interviewing plus the company. It's kind of a no risk way of trying things out. And we've actually, honestly, we've lost a couple of employees that we were hoping that were going to work out, but they didn't end up finishing the interview process because it wasn't a fit for them. And that's a win-win right there, because you don't find that out the hard way 6 months later when you've spent all this money training them. So it reduces your turnover dramatically. And for us, it has worked great.
Yeah, that sounds like a great process. And so you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I always think the true test of most things is when things are not going well, right? When there's a crisis, when there's a disaster, something like
Yep.
that. What about when things go wrong? How do you set your business up to handle a crisis without being directly involved in solutions?
A lot of that falls back to the processes that you have in place. So the more processes and the stronger processes that you have, you always fall back on that. So for us, manufacturing is it's very cyclical. It kind of goes down easily, and it's the last to come back, especially in the residential market. So it's kind of tough. It can be tough sometimes when it gets slow. So we go through those cycles, but we have some controls in place and some numbers that work in our business that we can look at, and we kind of know if things are slipping. We can see it usually a couple of months in advance. So we have some kind of dashboard numbers that we look at, and if we see these numbers kind of slipping into the yellow zone for too long, then we kind of, that's kind of our warning to start thinking about what we need to do, whether it's layoffs or hour reductions or whatever it is. But fortunately, we haven't had to lay off anybody since 2009, and that's been really great. So that's a plus. But 2009 was obviously tough for everybody.
Right.
In the U.S., it was tough for everybody in the world. We had to lay off several, but now we've got the systems in place where we could see it a lot farther out in advance, so people can have warning, and we could do different things like reducing hours rather than just letting go, things like that. And so, I mean, obviously, that's part of being a business owner. It's just tough choices have to be made sometimes. But if you've got the processes in place to continue with sales and continue with marketing, then you can still pick up market share in the downtimes. You just got to have those processes in place where you're still gaining market share. Maybe there's not as many jobs to be had out there, but if you can gain market share when those jobs come back, you're going to be one of those companies that just seems to like slide right through the bad times without anything happening.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Yeah, I think 2009. I still remember that. It
Oh
was a
yeah,
rough start of the year, but to your point, my agency at the time, I sold it 4 years ago, but ran it for a while, and 2009 was kind of in the middle of it, and we had our biggest by the end of the year. We had our biggest year of growth because we saw our competitors. We were just smart. We kind of hunkered down. We did have to lay people off at the beginning of the year, which was terrible. It was the first
sure,
time I
yep.
ever had to do that. Like, just, I was just heartbroken. I mean, obviously the employees were worse off than I was out of that situation, but it was a terrible thing to do and go through. But we just then kind of hunkered down and waited out some of our competitors going out of business, took their clients, and ended up the year stronger than ever, and kind of set ourselves on a good trajectory. So After
That's
that,
perfect.
we kind of built the tools like you're talking about, like the early warning, systems, but we were completely caught off guard at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Learn
yeah.
that lesson the hard way.
Exactly, exactly. And hopefully you don't have to learn it. I mean, I learned many things by doing the wrong thing, but hopefully I don't have to learn the same thing twice. Right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So let's, one last thing before we wrap up here. We always want to talk about the process of writing as a fellow author. I'd love to hear, you're in writing the book. Was there anything that you learned from the process of writing? What might you do differently next time? Just, any
Oh,
thoughts there?
I think I could write another book in about a third of the time that I've wrote this one. I learned so much.
Yeah.
Maybe getting into the weeds a little bit. I know for me, a lot of the work was done in the table of contents, really figuring out the proper content to put in the book, and having that table of contents really close at first. That way, I kind of knew where I was going. But what I really learned was I could apply a lot of the same techniques that we use in manufacturing, like lean manufacturing, to writing a book. And what I found out real quickly is the first half of the book, I was just I would write part of a chapter and then I would get bored with it or whatever. And I'd move to the next chapter and then I'd kind of come back and forth and have to re edit this and reopen that and re add a paragraph and all this other stuff and moving around. And really, if I could, next time if I wrote a book, I would do one chapter complete. I would edit it, I would have it 100% ready, 100% done. And then I'd go to chapter two and I would do it again. And basically, as I move through the book, just completely have it done, which is exactly what we do on the manufacturing line. We have small batches. We try to do batch size one of everything. And I think it would be so much more efficient, so much cleaner, and a better product at the end. Just a better book to read if you wasn't having to try to finish this whole book before you really went through the editing process.
I think I have too short an attention span to work on a whole chapter at a time, but I've done a few books now, and I'm a bit all over the place, I guess. I do agree, like starting with a table of contents first makes a huge difference, and even
Yes,
it's never stayed 100% the same from the very
that's right.
beginning, but the more after doing the first one, I had a lot better sense of, okay, there needs to be a process here. The first one was just kind of, I got it out the door, and it was a fun process, but I realized that I need to get my act together and stuff. So now I have a fairly good process, but I still jump around probably way too much. So I'm sure
Yeah.
there's inefficiencies there.
Well, and that's right. And I think I plan on probably writing another one at some point, and I'll probably be able to do it, like I said, in about a third of the time. But one thing that I mean, there's a lot of places out there that can help you publicate your book, get it printed, get the Amazon part set up, and all that stuff. And I would not have known how to do that myself.
Yeah.
So I did hire a service for that, but I was pretty much done with the book by the time I hired the service. But they kind of helped me with that final editing, the artwork, the cover, and all that stuff, and kind of helped me bring it all together. And I would just I would say that you don't go into writing a book expecting to make money. I think it's more of like you have something to offer and you want to put it out there in the form of a book, and that's really what I wanted to do. And I have no idea if we'll sell enough copies to make money. That was not the goal behind it, and I knew that from day one, and that took all the pressure off of the book, is by not having to know that I had to make money on it.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I think, yeah, if you have something valuable to share, it's it brings other opportunities as well.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with you and what you're doing?
The easiest way, you can find me on LinkedIn. Obviously, that's where I'm the most active at. But then, as far as all of our content, podcast, and the book, and other things that we have going on, is my website, thepushthrough.com. That's the push thru.com. All of our information there, a link to the book on the Amazon is there. So it's everything that I've kind of got going on in that world is on the push through.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Jeff Finney, owner of Ultimate Cabinet Components and author of That's It, I'm Fired, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kilstrom. Talk with you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.theagilebrand.show. To get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, visit my website at gregkihlstrom.com. Until next week, stay agile.